The iPhone review. Of course, that's why Christine's it.
Steven, what a great intro into our show as we just went live. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's Friday, March 25th, 2022. This week, we're talking about the new iPhone SE, some rumors about some upcoming products, and a shocking rumor that Apple is working on a new subscription service. And we'll get to that in a little bit because this is the iMore show. And you're going to want to stick around to the end because we have a special giveaway today. But before we get to that, let me introduce everybody. I am one of your hosts, Luke Filipowicz, writer for iMore, joined as always by iMore contributor Karen Freeman. How you doing, Karen?
Hello, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Thanks for being here. And also our news editor at iMore, Stephen Warwick, joining us as always. Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
And our special guest today, she hasn't been on the show in a while, but we love it when she comes around, is Christine Romero-Chan, iMore writer. Thank you for coming. And she's also the person who has the iPhone SE on her right now. How you doing, Christine?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Not too bad. Thanks for joining us. It's a little early where you are since you're on the West Coast, but we appreciate you getting up and talking to us about the iPhone SE. And that's what we're going to jump into right now. So Christine, you've been using the iPhone SE now for a while, and we've talked about it before on the show that the iPhone SE is not necessarily for us, maybe the people on the call, maybe even a lot of our listeners. It's kind of a bit of a niche market. But how's your experience? How's your experience been with it? And like, what have you liked about it? What have you really not liked about it? Give us a rundown.
Basically, well, with the A15, it's pretty fast and zippy. It's definitely weird coming from an iPhone 13 Pro going back to a home button. I kept when I tried to go back to the home screen, I kept swiping up from the bottom and bringing up Control Center, and I'm like, that's not what I want. So that happened like way more than I wanted it to. It's just weird going back to a home button. But I like the camera. I don't think the camera on it gets enough credit. It takes pretty good pictures like during the day. Of course, it's not going to take great pictures in like low light situations, but I don't think that's what the iPhone SE is like for. Like the people who want to take low light pictures aren't going to be looking at the SE.
Yeah, totally. I think like the camera is a great reason to praise the iPhone SE because it is really the same base camera that is on all the models. It's the same. Yeah. It doesn't have the other lenses. It doesn't have the ultra wide and it doesn't have the telephoto that the Pro has. But it is the exact same basic wide 12 megapixel lens. And
yeah, I did like some comparison photos outside. The pictures I did take, and I also took the same pictures with my iPhone 13 Pro and also the iPhone 13. The SE is actually pretty comparable to those two, as long as it's in a bright environment.
Definitely go check out, if you haven't yet, go check out the iPhone SE. Christine's iPhone SE review on iMore. It's very thorough, goes through a lot of in-depth analysis, her experience using it. And yeah, the camera, what's funny about the cameras is that like Apple's clearly, especially recently, kind of pushed that like the Pro models are the ones that have the better cameras and the more cameras. And, even with the 13, now with the Pro and the Pro Max, even having a bit different with the video stuff that they can do. It's nice to see that like for people who just want that phone that's going to be reliable, that they can take out of their pocket and snap a picture of, their friends at hanging out somewhere. If you're at Disney World, like Christine tends to be a lot, or Disneyland. Sorry, California's Disneyland.
Yeah, Disneyland.
Right. See, a Canadian here. I got to remember these things. But yeah, it's great that camera is so useful. And you do mention that it's not quite as good in low light, but even looking at the pictures that you have, it's not terrible. Like seeing the ones that you grabbed at Disneyland, like it's not its strong suit, of course, but it's certainly doable. And the iPhone SE also now, because of the A15, because it has such a powerful processor in it, it can do like what do they call them? Photographic styles,
Yeah,
sort of like,
photographic styles.
yeah, the sort of like filters that Apple has built in, which I thought was kind of a cool feature. It's a different way to sort of like look through your camera when you're looking at things.
It's a feature I still don't really use. I touch on that in my iPhone
Yeah.
13 Pro 6 months later review.
Yeah, totally. It's not for everyone, especially people who like really like to edit their photos quite a bit. Like I take apps to edit my photos like pretty heavily, or I even port them onto my computer to edit them. But yeah, what do you think? So where do you think this falls? Because I've always thought it was like it always clearly was the budget phone. And it still is, although it did get a price raise this year, right? It's $429 instead of $399. What are your feelings on that? Because I've always thought that $399 price point was so like crucial and so like such a good starting point. And even though it's only $30, I feel like you got to start looking at maybe some of the older phones that Apple still sells, like the iPhone 11 or the iPhone 12. And when you're kind of like comparing prices with the iPhone SE, where do you stand on that, Christine?
I'm not really a big fan of that price increase, but I was thinking maybe it has something to do with the 5G connectivity.
Totally.
But I mean, Brian did a good comparison with the iPhone SE and like if you should buy that over like the iPhone 12. So people should check that out.
Yeah, I think the oh man, I lost my train of thought for a second. I think that the price increase was a bit weird, and I do think the only thing that would make sense for it to have made it gone up is the 5G inclusion. And like I wonder how. I mean, 5G we know is the future of wireless technology. Obviously, it's slowly rolling out now, and not every phone and not every network has access to it. But we know it's the future. So I guess it's good that Apple included it. But if it was going to raise the price on the iPhone SE, it's like, wouldn't you want it to maybe have something else? Like, wouldn't you want to put like something better into it, like something that's a little more useful? Because like that was one thing that I sort of mentioned in my iPad Air review, which also got 5G connectivity this time around, but only sub 6, much like the iPhone SE. It only has access to sub 6. Is that worth the extra $30 to most people? I'd have to imagine probably not yet.
It's hard as well, isn't it? Because it's not a lot of money. It's only $30, but the 400, like the 100 price bracket, it's such a big psychological, like it's like when you go into a store and everything is, $599, $10.99 to have a phone that's $399. It even just sounds better and easier to say, oh, it's less than $400. And so whilst it's not like a big increase in it is only $30, and it's not even a big percentage increase, it just feels like a like you are paying just not over the odds, but it is. I think it I don't know how much like Apple is benefiting from increasing the price by $30, so it does seem a bit of a strange kind of introduction. Because the one thing I was going to ask about, I'm glad you touched it, Luke, was the 5G. Because Christine, I don't know what the 5G is. I guess it's kind of dependent on where you live, like what the 5G service is like in your area, and if you got to use 5G a lot, and how you found that in terms of performance, and whether it was actually sort of convenient to use. I saw a tweet the other day. It was like, oh, I've never been on 5G and thought, thank goodness I had 5G, because 4G was so slow. So even if it is that $30 increase for the 5G, are people really going to benefit from that extra connectivity, do you think?
For most people, I don't think they really care. Like, I think for most people, like the average person, it's like, oh, for LTE is fast enough. I mean, like on my iPhone 13 Pro, sometimes the 5G is actually like not that great, so I end up having to turn it off anyways, just to go back to the LTE.
Yeah. I don't find 5G. I don't find 5G to be an improvement at all. You all know I travel a lot. This is a hotel room I'm in now, and And none of the cities I've been in has 5G ever been like, oh, wow, I really see a difference. 5G is so much faster. No, it doesn't work at all. I feel like it's more like future proofing, like someday in the future, 5G will actually be an advantage, but I don't think it is yet. I don't know. Let us know in the comments or tweet at us if you feel differently. If you find where you live, 5G is something really fantastic, because
I live in a 5G city, and like Christine, I have found myself turning off 5G and or deliberately disconnecting because it is worse than the 4G that I have. And I mean, so no,
it's clear that the technology is still, it's still emerging. Obviously, it's still being implemented. Networks will get better over time, but there's kind of the old adage in tech, and a lot of people will say this, like, don't buy a product now for something it will deliver in the future. Buy a product now for what it delivers to you when you buy it, right? Today. So it's interesting.
It's a tough one.
It's a tough one because we know 5G, because we know 5G is going to be the future of connectivity, and we know that it's going to be important eventually to every phone will eventually have it. We'll eventually switch over to where 4G is no longer a thing, and hopefully by then everything will be smoother and there won't be people turning it off to get faster speeds on the slower connection. But it's weird to think was this the time for the iPhone SE to get it? Like, it kind of makes sense that you would want to put it on the flagship phones, but why would you need to increase the price for $30 and put it on the cheaper phone?
I have an answer for that.
Sure.
It's because the people that buy the iPhone SE do not tend to be regular upgraders. They tend to be people that use their phones until they are completely and totally dead. So they will hang on to their phones for 3, 4, 5 years or more. So if they don't get 5G now, 4 or 5 years from now, 5G might really be something that they would miss out on. So I think that's why they put it in now. I do think that charging the extra $30 for it makes it a hard sell, especially to the kinds of people who are buying the iPhone SE, because they're not going to be able to see the future proofing advantage to it. So I don't know. It's a tough one. It's an interesting choice, but
especially since there is so many other, they're not iPhones, but there are so many other phones around that $399, $400 price point when you start looking at the space. So I'm curious if, the thing is, no phone can be an iPhone except an iPhone. So obviously, if you're really locked in, like Apple, unfortunately, probably has you if you don't want to switch, which is totally fine. All of us use iPhones and typically don't want to switch to anything else. But it is interesting that, there are people who will grab what they think is the best for them, right? In terms of price, and they don't really care if it's Android or iPhone. They can kind of go back and forth because it's not their life, like the phone isn't their lifeblood like it is for some of us. So it'll be interesting to see, when the next SE comes out, which likely won't be for quite a few years yet, maybe 2 or 3 or something like that. But if and when they refresh it again, it'll be interesting to see, do they try and, because you would assume that maybe the parts would have gotten a little cheaper by that point to put into the, and now that they have the 5G in there, they'll be able to work it and manufacture it faster and a little cheaper. So maybe they can drop that price point back down again, right?
And make a big fuss about it. And now lower price, just $399.
Unfortunately,
we remember.
Christine, you were quite critical about, I say critical, you weren't overly enthused about the battery life in the new phone. Obviously 5G kind of plays a part in that. What was your sort of data? It's obviously, you can read, Apple says, it does 15 hours of battery life, but I can't even visualize what 15 hours is. You go by, what time of the day do I have to start charging it? How did you find day to day the battery in terms of use, and how often you were charging it and how long it would last and stuff?
Well, because it's it's recycling the iPhone 8 body. It's but the battery is smaller, so it's not going to last as long. One of my favorite things about the 13 Pro is it can pretty much last me all day. Mm-hmm. Even at Disneyland, but with the SC, I noticed usually by midday, I would have to start thinking about plugging it in.
Gosh.
And it's
because that's one of the quirks of it was the iPhone 12 and 13 mini as well. Is packs a lot of great features, but the form factor is such a limit on the size of the battery and how long you can keep using it for. So,
although I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Christine, maybe you know this, but the iPhone SE does have a slightly bigger battery than the previous version of the SE.
Yeah, slightly.
Yeah, so you will get I don't know how much it'll actually amount to, but you will get a little more juice out of it if you have an iPhone SE and you're upgrading from that.
But
you will get a little.
The question is, does that offset the increased power draw from the chip?
Exactly.
And the 5G, which is I mean, certainly from Christine's experience and what you're saying here, it sounds like it probably doesn't, which is again another.
And battery life, I'll agree with you, Christine. Battery life might be one of the hard. Like you talk about how like going back to a home button felt really weird to you. I recently switched down from an iPhone 13 Pro to an iPhone 11, and the only thing I really miss, I don't miss ProMotion. I don't really miss having the extra camera. None of that really matters to me. The thing I miss most is the battery life of the iPhone 13 Pro. And even though it's not that the iPhone 11 is horrible, but it's significantly noticeable that I'm charging it more often.
Well, another thing to note is that all of us here, and probably everyone listening, are kind of power users of our phones. I had the iPhone 13 Pro now, but before that I had the 12 mini, and my biggest complaint about it was the terrible battery life. I always had to charge it midday. And I gave that phone to my daughter with the caveat. I'm like, honey, just so you understand, the battery life is terrible. I gave them one of the Snap-on MagSafe chargers. I'm like, you're going to need this, you're going to need this extra battery, keep it with you. And my kid came back to me and said, Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. This lasts me all day. No problem. I never have to recharge it during the day. Well, guess what? My kid doesn't sit on their phone all day. So they don't use the phone enough for battery to be an issue. But that's a personal thing. But it's up to you to keep in mind that SE users may not be using their phones as much as somebody who would normally buy a Pro phone or a flagship phone.
Yeah, totally. And that's the same way too. Like I was using, being used to the iPhone 13 Pro and, using it very, very heavily, and then going back to an iPhone 11. Like I noticed the difference. It's stark because I'm using my phone the same way, but not everyone. Yeah. As Karen mentions, not everyone does that. But yeah, overall, like, Christine, do you still think that the iPhone, like, what's your official verdict? Like, do you still think, obviously it's not for you and it's probably not for any of us, but do you still think that the iPhone SE is a pretty good deal for what it's worth?
For what it's worth, yeah. I think its target audience is mostly the people who still want the home button. So, like their our parents or some grandparents who don't want to change and get used to like swipe gestures on the 11 and 12 and 13, and they don't want change. They just want the home button because it's like, oh, that's how I get back to the home screen and do everything. It's for people like that, pretty much. And I mean, for those people who still want the home button, and I mean, they're getting a slight upgrade with the A15 and the cameras, so, and the 5G, even though 5G is not really like necessary at this point, but it's for future proofing, so that's nice.
Yeah,
there was some rumors for this year and possibly next year that there might be an iPhone SE Plus. Do you guys think there's a market for that? So it would be, obviously the SE is built around the old iPhone 8, so an SE Plus would be an iPhone 8 Plus, but with, the beefier internals and stuff like that. It would solve some of the battery issues. The Plus always had, better battery. Do you think that would be maybe a better iPhone SE than the current one we have?
Possibly. I mean, like my mother-in-law, I think she still uses like I think it's a 7 Plus or 8 Plus. I don't know. I think she prefers that larger size. So, I mean, one thing I did like about using the SE was the fact that I could use it with one hand a lot better than my 13 Pro. So
nice one. Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think unless Karen, do you have any more questions about the iPhone SE or anything else that you think we could cover?
I think we can move on.
Brilliant. Well, the next thing we'll talk about some rumors about products that haven't been released yet. And there's one I want to talk about because I am very, very excited about this prospect. We're hearing kind of multiple reports that Apple possibly has a new MacBook in the works for later this year. So it's the M2 MacBook, and we recently just heard today from Ross Young that Apple is going to make this new MacBook slightly larger than the previous one, so like a 13.3 inch to a 13.6 inch screen, which I think is a really cool upgrade. It's still a little bit away, and we're also hearing that it might not even be an M2 MacBook. So yeah, what do you guys think about this? Yeah, the prospects of the new MacBook that's possibly coming out, the MacBook Air, that is, at least. Yeah.
Give me the colors.
The colors.
yeah,
Yes.
I was about to say.
I'm actually pretty excited about that because I'm not in the market for a new MacBook just yet, but when I am, I'm strongly considering switching from Pro to Air. So especially if it comes in colors.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, you might not have to make the switch, as it were, because there is a sort of rumor that Apple might not drop the Pro, but like the 13-inch Air and the 13-inch Pro might become one machine, or they might drop the Pro designation from so they're definitely making some moves kind of at the lower end of the lineup to fill those gaps. But I'm really the only thing, like, I'm with Luke. The colors, I think, incredible. I think they were a smash hit with the iMac, and I think something similar or slightly different, but the same range, the same bright vibrancy would be really good. But we're most recently hearing that the M2 chip might not be coming in, and I'm not sure I would be that interested in a MacBook that doesn't get a big silicon boost. I would probably buy the old one if it came with the same chip as the previous one. It might be the M1. It's from Kuoming Chi, who says it's just the M1 chip. So that could indicate the M1 Pro or the M1 Max as opposed to just the M1. But we were all sort of led to believe it would be the M2 processor. So I'm not sure how I feel about not getting a second generation of Apple Silicon, because we're also hearing that it's not going to get mini LED either, which we were previously told was, one of the sort of not the coup de grace, but one of the headline reasons to upgrade this year. So it feels like the reasons to upgrade to this new rumored MacBook Air are starting to diminish a little bit. But yes, under the colors, I think.
I feel like M2 doesn't really mean anything to me yet because we haven't heard anything about what it actually is, or maybe there won't even be a such thing. Maybe they'll change the letter. I mean, we just don't know. So without knowing the stats or seeing it in action, that just doesn't mean anything to me yet.
Wasn't there I'm sorry if you already went over this because I dropped out of the call there for a quick sec, but wasn't there a rumor about potentially a MacBook, like a bigger MacBook Air, like a 15-inch MacBook Air?
Yes, that came out. So we've heard this week. So while you were away, we said the new MacBook Air for this year might be ever so slightly larger, so 13.6 inches as opposed to 13.3 inches. But DSCC's Ross Young is also reporting their product roadmaps suggest that there's going to be a 15-inch MacBook next year. MacBook Air, that is, and more specifically today that it'll be a 15.2-inch model. So, really pushing the form factor of the Air, because we never had a 15-inch MacBook Air. They considered it as far back as there's internal Apple emails from 2007 and like notes from exec meetings where they discussed the 15-inch MacBook Air, but we got 11 and 13 instead. And it was rumored as early as last year that it might be back on the cards, but Apple was testing it but hadn't closed the door completely. So possibly, hopefully, maybe, I would certainly be interested. A 15-inch model, not this year but next year. So there will be a bigger MacBook this year, but the following year there will be a whole new 15-inch form factor.
I think that's the one I'm more excited for. That's the rumor that gets me the more excited, because like I don't need a MacBook Pro. I've wanted a MacBook Pro for a long time, but I really don't need it. And I've convinced myself so far that I don't need to spend the money on it. But I haven't had a Mac laptop in quite a while. I think the last one I had was like a 2017. I mean, I still have it, but I don't really use it that much anymore since I got my iMac. But like, I have a 2017 MacBook Air, which just doesn't quite do it for what I need it for. I use it if I really need a computer on the go kind of thing. But if I could even just with how I've seen the M1 perform in, two different devices now, my iPad Air 5 and my M1 iMac, I would, even if it ends up still just being an M1, I think that if it goes up to a 15-inch screen, I think that's like an auto buy for me. We'd have to see how expensive it'll be, obviously, but because I'm assuming it would be more than the 13-inch would probably be a safe bet.
For sure.
But I think that would get me really interested in the MacBook Air lineup, just because I do like as great as 13-inch can be for like portability, and it is nice and light, which is great. If they kind of keep that same form factor, keep as much lightness as they can, but they put it in a slightly bigger screen, I think like that's just going to give me so much more. It sounds crazy to say 2 inches is so different, but it really makes a difference. Like screen size really
and a
makes
laptop
difference.
screen, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Luke, I have some bad news though. The form factor is possibly changing to a slightly different design to what we currently have, because you literally just said, "Hey, keep the form factor." So sorry.
Yeah,
but yeah, so it's possibly the more flat and square MacBook that we got with the Pro, as opposed to the current M1 Air, which is quite rounded at the edges and a bit more of a wedge shape. Aesthetically, obviously, that's totally subjective, but practically, that's quite good because it leaves much more space for battery and internal components, so it could get quite a decent boost in terms of battery life, which is obviously one of the biggest kind of selling points of the MacBook Air. I had an interesting question about the colors. Luke, the M1 iMac, the front is white, isn't it? The bezels. Did I make that up? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Do you think if there's colors on a MacBook Air, they would go to white bezels as well? Because we use a concept render. I think it's from John Prosser and friends. It is not. Sorry, I don't know who it's from. But we use we have some renders kicking about of the possible colored MacBook Air, and they all have white bezels. And I've seen a few people say, "Oh, I don't like that at all," and it is I don't know how I feel. So I'm curious. Yeah, would you take colors and the white front? Is that?
The render that I'm looking at is it's from Devam Jengra. It looks like the bezels are white and the interior is the same color as the outside. So the
housing around the keyboard would match the colors.
Yeah.
I'd say from using the iMac, like I was worried about the white bezels. I actually mentioned that like way before I got this, and I even mentioned it in the review I did last year. But I actually think black would be weirder on I think that it would like contrast with the color really oddly, because the color's more subtle, right? Like it's especially the color on the front, because the iMac has where the color on the back and the color on the front are slightly different. So the color on the front is quite pale and very nice. It's kind of a nice like pale blue, because I have the blue version. And I feel like the really harsh contrast between if it was to be a black bezel and the blue would look a little odd. Like this looks more inviting. It does when you see it, and when you're just kind of looking at it, there's a really pleasant nature to it. So I've come around on the white bezel. I was like worried about it at first when it first was like thought up of and we first knew it was going to happen, but I've come around on the white bezel. And also it's not like it's bright white. It is a bit like it's kind of it is white. I don't want to say it's cream, but it is like kind of dulled, if that makes sense. So it's not like it's like this harsh.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's not like this. It's this really harsh, contrasting white. It's like it does have a bit of like softness to it, which is
that's actually really important, because if it's bright white, that might look good with the metal housing of the computer itself, but the bright white will make your screen look duller. So when you're looking at a white screen, like you're surfing the web or whatever, a bright white bezel will make your screen look dull, will make your whatever website you're looking at look dull. So I'm actually glad that you said that they sort of dulled the white of the bezels, because that probably makes the screen look better, right?
Yeah, it does, and it looks great. It honestly, like I don't even really notice it anymore. The white bezel definitely fades away once you're like into your
That's
work
what you
or
want.
into whatever you're doing.
Bezels should fade away. You don't want to notice them.
So if they do a similar thing on the iMac Air, I think I'm all for it. Especially if that means we get funky, nice, bright, vibrant colors. It would be great. I'd be totally into that. Before we continue, we're going to throw it over to Karen so she can tell us about some friends of ours.
Yes. Have you ever hit a technical snafu shopping online? Has filling out payment fields given you a headache? Has a mobile banking app even been down when you wanted to use it? Capital One believes that everyone deserves better banking. This means easier access to their money and more security. That's why Capital One is investing in machine learning. Machine learning allows Capital One to do things like fight fraud with random forests. Models quickly detect suspicious activity and make it faster to alert federal investigators. Identify how mobile app outages happened with causal models. Keeping our mobile app up and running doesn't happen by accident. Anomaly detection and incident response help determine why app outages happen so engineers can quickly remedy them. Speed up online shopping with machine learning at the edge. Make shopping with virtual card numbers smoother and more secure. This technology is based on logistic regression models and running inference in the browser. It identifies payment fields, which helps make using virtual card numbers easier and faster. The potential of machine learning is so big. See how Capital One is using machine learning to create the future of banking. Search machine learning at Capital One. Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Capital One, for sponsoring us today. Moving on to probably the next most interesting rumor we've heard in a while, I want to say, out of Apple is there are reports that Apple is planning a hardware subscription service for not only iPhones, but also potentially other hardware.
This is something I've been wanting for like years.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I guess, Christine, you are on the iPhone upgrade program, right?
Technically, yes, but there was a thing where my Apple Card payment wasn't going through this last time, so I just kind of bought the phone outright and sold my 12 Pro to my family member.
Okay. Because it's not in Canada. I've always wanted it to come to Canada because then I feel like I would be getting a new phone every year, which would be, a nice dopamine hit from my brain. But I unfortunately, it's just our cell phone providers just have too much of a grip on the industry where they're trying to block companies, OEMs, from doing that because it'll make them money and not the carrier money. So unfortunately, there's a bit of regulation to sort of get around in some places. So how exactly for someone who doesn't know, how exactly does the iPhone upgrade program kind of work? Give us a quick breakdown.
So you get the iPhone and as long as you make at least, I think it's 12 payments, then when the next phone comes out, you turn in your old phone and they pay off the rest of the loan that you had, and you get the new phone and it'll start a new contract. So you just keep making those payments.
It's always a 2-year cycle, so you're always 12 months ahead, basically. But you can decide to not upgrade if you want, so you just pay another year and then it kind of expires.
That's exactly right. So basically, it breaks down the price of the phone into 24 equal increments and adds in Apple Care on top of that. So it does include Apple Care. You don't have a choice on that or not. And then, so if you want to trade in your phone at 12 months, you can without any penalty. You just give the phone back and you get your new phone. But if you do want to hang on to it for the full 24 months, the phone is yours at the end. So you can keep that that 2-year-old phone and give it to a family member, or you can sell it to Apple and get money for it.
I can't believe you don't have that in Canada. We even have it in the UK, in Scotland. This is seems like a bit of a
I mean,
it's a really good deal. I don't want to say deal because you're not getting any discounts.
You don't save any money.
You're not saving any money. You're basically renting. You're basically renting an iPhone in perpetuity instead of buying it outright.
But is Apple
similar
Care
to
not
leasing
included?
a car?
What What?
Apple Care's include is included free of charge, is it not? That was always my understanding. Is it not? Is it
Apple? No,
price?
absolutely not. I used to sell this at the Apple Store. That iPhone.
So did I.
So very
obviously
well
just worse than you had it.
But you were a technician.
Or I was just lying to the customers. Maybe it's but
yeah. The technicians lied to customers all the time because they didn't get the salespeople training. But anyway. So go to find a salesperson in the Apple Store, people, to buy something.
Yeah, it's cool. It's super convenient. It's a very easy way to get a new, like you said, Luke, a new iPhone every 12 months. There's I think there's like one upfront payment that is slightly more when you're on the start of a new kind of contract. But so the report comes from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, so incredibly reliable source of information, and it's about the project Apple's developing. It is still in the development stage, so Apple could scrap it or get rid of it or change it fundamentally to how it's being described just now. But he says that Apple's working on it's a subscription, specifically a subscription service, like you would subscribe to Apple TV Plus or Apple Arcade or the Apple One bundle, something like that. So it sounds like it would take out like we said with the iPhone upgrade program, as Karen explained, you have the option to forego the year upgrade and pay off another 12 months and then the phone is yours. It sounds like with a subscription service, there probably wouldn't be that option to retain the phone outright at the end of the contract once you'd finished paying it off. The way he describes it is a move that could make device ownership similar to paying a monthly app fee. So you probably would be able to manage it through your iOS account and stuff like that with all your other subscriptions. But yeah, so it would, I guess it would be possibly a cheaper version of the iPhone upgrade program, but you are guaranteed that you would have to give the phone back at some point. And I suppose it makes sense that there might be different levels of subscription for different models of the phone, depending on Pro, Max, whatever, what size of storage you get. And then it seems obvious that Apple would include services so there would be like an Apple One bundle that comes with a phone or with an iPad or with a Mac. And I think that's probably the more exciting thing, because I've always thought the iPhone upgrade program, like you, Luke, is a great solution. I've never wanted to subscribe more, but for like an iPad or a Mac or something, I think the prospects are really interesting.
Yeah, although I can't imagine paying to rent an Apple product for years and then not getting it at the end. It just seems like on the iPhone upgrade program. I mean, yeah, it's almost like you're renting it, but you are actually rent to own. I mean, you do get it at the end of if you can hang on to it for 2 full years, you do get it to keep. I can't imagine not getting the computer.
I think it depends on. So if you do 2 years of the iPhone upgrade program, you pay the phone off, it's yours. You've paid the entire value of the device. As Karen said, you don't save any money. So the iPhone cost $1,000. You've paid $1,000 by the end of that 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have to give the phone back, then you must pay less. So I think it would depend on how much money potentially you could save renting the device. Because if it was a substantial, I'm not too fussy about I do the upgrade program, but I always give the phone. I don't think the iPhone upgrade program makes sense if you don't give the phone back after 12 months. It's a bit of an awkward, kind of lock-in thing, because once you're in, you are kind of in to get your money's worth. But I'm not I don't get sentimental about the device or anything like that. So I would happily have a device for X number of months and then just give it in and get the next one. So if it was a substantial, and I mean substantial monthly saving, I would probably be really interested in this, I think.
Well, one thing to keep in mind about the iPhone upgrade program, if you do give the phone back after the 12 months, that's fine. You've basically, let's say it's $1,000 phone, just to keep the math easy. You've paid only $500 on the phone. So you give the phone back, you get a new phone, and the cycle continues. That's fine. But if you do the full 2 years, if you keep that phone for 2 years and you own the phone at the end of that, you can sell the phone back to Apple. So you could get potentially $300-400 on that $1,000 phone. So in that case, you actually have saved money if you can hold on to it for the full 2 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. Which I guess, like, if this subscription service does end up eventually rolling out kind of as it's described now, that would likely not be the case, because you're just constantly paying a fee to have access to it. Once you stop paying that fee, it's going back. You're not getting it regardless of when you give it back, kind of thing. I think this is such an interesting prospect and such an interesting idea, but like, it brings up a lot of questions for me about like what is ownership in the digital age? Like, a lot of people talk about this too, about like specifically with software, but like, if we're going to start doing subscription services for freaking iMacs, let's say, like that, like, I don't know. It's weird to me to not own the device I'm using, I guess. Like, I can understand paying it off and like slowly owning it. That makes sense to me, but like, just not really having ownership over what I'm using every day for work, for personal, things. Like, obviously I do this now, but you would want to back up all your stuff like an insane person and have it off your device as well. But like, it makes me feel a little weird. I don't know. Christine, you said you've been like dying.
Well,
for
actually, like this. I thought the program would be like, you can upgrade like every year or something. So if it's you're just like renting it, I'm not so keen on.
I think that's probably the hard thing about talking about it, is the details are quite nebulous at this point. The other thing it does raise, Luke, kind of to touch on what you were saying, is it does make questions about repair and right to repair and like, that sort of thing also a little bit, because if you rent a phone from Apple for 12 months, Apple is not going to let you, go away and repair that in, any repair shop that you can find. You're going to have to, at the very least, use an Apple authorized reseller, if not an Apple store. And like you said, there's, questions all sorts about, the ownership, and then the bloodlines between the software and the hardware, and it's like, but you don't own the phone, but like, do you own the digital content on the phone, or like you just rent some of that, or it's a very strange thing. The one interesting thing for me is the way the iPhone upgrade program works, because there's only one flagship iPhone a year. It runs for 12 months. That's the minimum. But if you were just renting or subscribing to the device, could you have a shorter term? Because that is also interesting. If you could rent a laptop for 6 months or 3 months or something like that, I wonder if there's a market there possibly for a device subscription service that is a shorter term, solution for people who don't want to commit to a 2-year iPhone upgrade program or a 1-year upgrade cycle.
Yeah, Christopher.
And, I was just going to bring that up. I was going to mention that even before Christopher commented, but Apple has had leasing programs for a long time. It's the business program. So Christopher in the comments says that he did a business lease through Apple 3 years ago and was paying $250 a month for 2 MacBook Pros and 2 HomePods.
Yeah, which that's a lot of tech.
It sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot of money, but it is a lot of tech.
I think my favorite thing about buying an iPhone or a mobile phone contract is there are so many ways to do it, and there's basically now an option that works best for everyone. So, for some people, depending on their employment situation and finances and all that sort of stuff, it makes the most sense for them to, like iPhone SE, right? You buy the phone outright, and Karen said you just run it into the ground for as long as you need it to. And then for some people, it makes sense to be on top of the curve with the iPhone upgrade program. For some people, it makes sense to go through a carrier. If there's just one more way to buy an iPhone or another piece of hardware, then I think that's a good thing. But like I said, I'd be really curious if it was guaranteed that you have to give the device back at the end, which seems likely, how much that would save you in terms of what you'd be paying on a monthly basis. And also, would a subscription include Apple One, or Apple, if you rent a watch, would you get Apple Fitness Plus or something like that? That is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think with the business leasing, the whole idea with business leasing is that you're getting technology in bulk. So it's basically aimed at small businesses to, if they need like 10 or 20 MacBooks for all of their employees, and they want to keep them in new MacBooks, but they don't want to have it to buy new MacBooks every few years. So on the business lease program, they could get, like, everybody could get all new Macs every 3 years, for example, without having to actually buy any of them outright. So I don't know. Maybe they're planning to bring something like that to the general public. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when I first heard about this, I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. But the more I dig into it, I'm like, I don't know if this is how I'd want to buy my Apple hardware. I want the Apple iPhone program to come to the upgrade program, the iPhone upgrade program to come to Canada. I've wanted that for years. I don't know. I unfortunately, the way our laws and our systems work up here, I'm not sure it ever will. But
I wonder if there's probably more of a market for more upgrade programs. So the iPad upgrade program, the Mac, obviously those are slightly different. That's
pretty much what I would want.
The phone has a very fixed 12-month life cycle. We get a new iPhone every September. It's gospel at this point. And maybe the iPad Air or something like that is different, but I would definitely consider an iPad upgrade program or a Mac upgrade program. But I think, Luke, like what you're saying, and Christine, obviously, you were surprised about, it's a subscription and you give the device back as opposed to the upgrade and stuff. I think a lot of people would have that reservation about, I'm paying all of this. It's like the difference between buying and renting a property. Obviously, it's not affordable for some people to buy a property, but if you're renting a property, you're just giving money, but you don't have anything to show for it at the end of it. It's a it's a fixed term kind of benefit. So.
Yeah. And Christopher points out in the comments that the business lease does require you to give it back at the end of 2 years. And there's no option, there's no wiggle room. It's 2 years.
Yeah.
So
and
if
even
Apple's
if you wanted to keep them, you've not paid anything towards it.
No. No. So I think that's not going to be very appealing to the general public. Whereas if it's more like an upgrade, like the iPhone upgrade program, but expanded to all the other devices, I think that might be really fun.
I think it would ultimately come down to the cost. That would be, if it was half the price of the iPhone upgrade program to subscribe to the iPhone, just give it back when you're done, I'd probably bite your hand off for it. Like I would go for that. So yeah, it does make a difference.
Yeah, that's true. It if the idea is that you're not having to pay off the phone, because the idea with the iPhone upgrade program is that if you keep it for the 2 years, you will have it, right? You are renting to own. So if you're not doing that, you would assume that like the price would have to be at least a bit lower for monthly, because you're not really trying to pay off what you're doing, right? That's not the point. You're paying for access to it. Yeah. So that I am
a realist, by the way. This is Apple. I know it won't be 50% cheaper. I'm just dreaming.
Obviously, but I think you have a good point. It will kind of come down to, first of all, how it all works. Obviously, the minutia of it, how exactly the terms work, and what what you get and what you don't. But I think it will also come down to, if it is just a straight up like subscription and you have it for as long as you subscribe, and as soon as you stop subscribing, it's done kind of thing. Then I am curious about what the price would be and what it would compare to, an iPhone upgrade program or something like that. I do agree with you, Karen, that, and we've all kind of said this too, if it was just like the iPhone upgrade program all of a sudden became the MacBook upgrade program, and there's a version of that, like that would be very appealing for sure. Cause it would just like, it's nice to not have to pay a giant lump sum for a new device.
Maybe if you think about subscriptions, other than the iPhone, it makes more sense, because it makes more sense to upgrade your iPhone every 12 months than it does the Mac Studio. If you buy a Mac Studio, you would hope it would last 10, 15 years possibly. Maybe that's ambitious, but not 12 months like the iPhone. So maybe a subscription as opposed to an upgrade plan of some sort makes more sense in that. But then you also have to think, if you subscribe to a Mac Studio for 5 years, you might look back and think, well, I should have just bought this because it would have been cheaper.
Yeah. No, I think the idea of the subscription is to continually have new tech without having to invest in the large upfront pricing of new tech.
But it's interesting for sure. It like I said, I think the more ways we have to buy the products that suit more people's needs, I think the better. So So
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
excited. I hope it happens in some respect, just so we can come back to this conversation and see how wrong we all were about it. Also,
Yeah.
All right, before we got about 10 minutes left here, but we actually have kind of some exciting news. We have a giveaway where you can win some really interesting things. So I'm gonna shoot it over to Steven and he can tell us all the details about that.
Yeah, so we are super excited to announce we're doing a giveaway here for the iMore show listeners and also for our readers over at iMore.com. It starts today. It's going to run for 3 weeks until April the 15th. I hope I haven't made up that date. Let me check. Yeah, midnight until April the 15th. And we've teamed up with an amazing company called Grid Studio. If you haven't heard of them, Grid basically make these incredible pieces of artwork from nostalgic pieces of old recycled tech. So they'll take something like the original iPhone or an Apple Watch or a Game Boy, and they'll disassemble it, turn it into like an art installation with labeled schematics and drawings and diagrams. I actually have one here. Grid were very kind enough to send me this iPhone 4S a few years ago. So if you're on the stream live, you can see that is a disassembled iPhone 4S. It's got all of the parts, the battery, the screen, the camera pieces, and all that sort of thing. So we have not one, not two, but 5 incredible prizes that will be given away, like I said, to our listeners here and to our readers. So all you need to do to enter, when you're done with the show, is go to iMore.com. There'll be a link to the giveaway in the description of the podcast. Or if you just find our website, it'll be in the top banner. You'll see the note for our giveaway. Go there, you can check out the prizes and all of the ways to enter. It's a fairly standard giveaway. The ones where you sign in and then you've got an option to tweet and you get like an extra entry and stuff like that. So there's lots of ways to enter and increase your chances of winning. It's totally free. And the prizes we have, so we've got the grand prize is a Grid 1. So that's the original iPhone that's being disassembled and turned into art, just like I said. That only retails for about $400 on Grid's website, so it's a really amazing prize. A couple of other prizes, we've got the Grid 4S and the 5. So as the name suggests, that's the iPhone 4S, which I have here, and the iPhone 5. And then we also have the Grid A7 and the A5X. So that's those old iPhone chips that have been taken out and put in these really cool, like acrylic blocks. So they make, amazing little desk ornaments or like a shelf piece or something like that. So, 3 weeks from today, that giveaway will close. So go and head over to the website as soon as you're done with the show and enter. It's open to residents in the United States and the UK. So sorry, Luke, you can't enter. And I think that's all of the important information. Did I forget anything? What do you think?
I think you got it. I'm just curious. How many times can you enter?
You can enter. So I don't know what the total. You can only enter once as Luke. Right. But you can garner lots of different entries. For example, you can get 10 entries by subscribing to the podcast. So if you're listening to me right now, then you're already 10 steps ahead of everyone. You can get an entry by tweeting about the giveaway. You can get an entry by following us on Twitter, all that sort of thing. So you can enter once per person, but there are lots of different ways to increase your chances of winning once you've entered. So good luck to everyone involved. And we will draw prizes for that once it closes and have some winners to announce shortly after.
Very cool. Steven, since you have one right there in front of us, you have the 4S one, just because to describe it a bit to people, it is a completely broken down, like literally every little part, like the chips, the ribbons that connect to the battery,
the flex cables, the logic board, everything is on here.
Yeah.
And the cool thing as well is each one is slightly unique. So this is a kind of a landscape setup, but the iPhone, the original iPhone, the Grid 1, that's like a square because obviously it's a smaller phone, less complex, so there's less parts that go into it and stuff. Mine's got a quote from Steve Jobs on here and like a little replica signature of his as well, and they come in a really high quality, really nice frame. It looks great in my office. They're fantastic conversation starters. And it's completely free to enter. So get yourself involved.
And each part labeled?
Every single one. So, and even some of these, so like I'm looking at the 4S now, the screen, it has like the dimensions and stuff on it like that. So it's like a really, everything, the vibration motor, volume up, volume down, the chip cover, everything you can think of that went into your old iPhone. Yeah.
It's really like having a living like technical drawing. Have you ever seen like those technical drawings that
are
done of like cars or like very fancy text or whatever, and it breaks down everything. But it's like having that like something awesome and visual and a representation of it that you can like put up on your wall.
Definitely.
It's like a technical sculpture.
Yeah,
yes,
they are. They're I've been wanting one for a while actually, because they just seem like such a cool piece. So this is such an interesting opportunity. If you want to check it out, definitely head on over to our site, subscribe to us, do everything you can to get those entries, tweet us out on social media, follow us on Twitter, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, and go check out Grid Studio's website as well, because we have the prize that I've talked about, but they do all sorts of stuff. So they've got lots of different Apple products. I think they even have an Apple Watch, which is a super interesting one. But they've also got some nostalgic consoles. I believe they've got like the Game Boy Advance and Color, and even some Blackberries and stuff like that. So if you don't fancy any of our prizes, by all means, go check out their website. But the ones we have are free, so it seems like a bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah. Christine, right before we end here, do you have those green iPhones on you right now?
Yeah.
Can we see them? I want to see them in person because I've only seen them in. So that's the regular iPhone 13.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see. It looks
is
black.
Definitely black in that camera. There's no getting around that.
It is a very dark green though, right? Like a very dark kind of rich green. Yeah. Yeah. And then
I went to look at them. I went to look at them at the Apple Store, and they are much prettier in person than they are.
Yeah.
That seems to be a running theme with same happened with the 13 Blue. Always go see it in the store.
It's so hard to capture those colors. Christine's pictures are very good. I highly suggest checking them out.
They'll be in my iPhone 13 Pro review. That should be done like soon.
Yeah.
So, we'll link that one. Not in this episode show notes because it's not published yet, but in next week's episode show notes, we'll post Christine's review.
Yes.
It'll be up on the site soon.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to pretty much the end of our hour. I would like to thank everybody for tuning in. Anyone who is currently listening to us live, thank you so much for interacting with us, giving us comments, and just being here with the show. We really appreciate you. Of course, if you're listening not live in your podcatcher of choice, or you're catching us on YouTube after the fact, we also appreciate you. Thank you so much. We love having this community here. If you have any questions for us, or just in general comments about the show, or anything we've talked about, feel free to tweet us at iMore. Let us know what you think. Let us know if there's things you want us to talk about. Christine, thank you so much for coming on the show, talking about your experience with the iPhone SE. That was greatly appreciated, and I'm sure we'll see you back sooner rather than later. And I guess last thank you I want to shout out is to Jim Metzendorf, who always makes us sound so good, our audio editor. And until next time, this has been the iMore Show, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.